opening tonight of Eidola. We're really lucky in Canada that we have such great support for contemporary art and here at Open Space. That includes the Capital Regional District, the BC Arts Council, the Lottery Foundation, although they recently watched on us, and the Canada Council for the Arts. And I think, as all of us know, their support is really integral. This is kind of a special project for us. I mean, for many years, Open Space has been thinking about how the different disciplines that it represents come together to create a richer and more deep understanding of visual art, new music, literary, media arts. And I think Ted Hiebert and David have done a marvelous job with this exhibition and this project to bring that dialogue to life in the space. I just want to digress for a minute. Ted is the current chair of the board, and he's moving on to Cecchetto, and he's been such a great board member and leader for this organization. I really want to thank him for all of his rigor and his very good ideas and all the things that he's contributed over the years to Open Space. And similarly, Paige, another board member who's moving to Toronto, has been really they joined forces over to bring to this project the cumulative effect of many, many years and many conversations over the years. So they're going to be introducing the two artists, Helen Moffat and William Brent.
Well, I guess maybe what I'd like to do is just give a very brief introduction to the project. And maybe David then can talk a little bit about just kind of the interdisciplinary aspect of what we're trying to do here. And we won't take long, maybe 5 minutes or so. And we'd like just to give the floor to the artists, really, to give you a more detailed version of how their imaginations are in play in terms of what the exhibition is trying to pull together. So, I mean, for David and I'm a visual artist by training, David's a musician. And just through our series of conversations at the table at Open Space, we found that, interestingly enough, we just weren't on the same page. We had these different ingrained disciplinary biases. When I said one thing, David was hearing something else, and vice versa, even though we both took our own disciplines quite seriously. So in a lot of ways, this show comes out of that conflict, out of this conflict of dialogue, of trying to understand what each other were saying and where each other were coming from. Basically, our first task was to find something that we thought we could have in common. And we narrowed it down to the idea of bias. You know, what we both got in common is a failure to communicate, a bias here, right? And so we started searching around, seeing, well, who do we know that we might be able to bring into this discussion? Not necessarily in a way that is self-representing, or even that necessarily has to be full of integrity, but in a way that's willing to compromise itself for the purpose of dialogue and discussion. And happily, we both knew, me an artist and for David a musician, who shared similar affinities to these types of questions, to these types of contaminations of discourse and failures to communicate. So, Helen being a sort of old friend of mine, and William, I think, of David's, we thought, well, here's a really great opportunity to let dialogue and disciplinary bias lead together. And, you know, we happily encountered this term, Eidola, which is a Greek word that has a real double meaning, that really brought together kind of the aesthetic that we're thinking of. So Eidola in Greek means two things. It means bias, in exactly the way that we've been talking about, these different frames of reference, different perspectives on a similar question. But it also means ghost. It means these sort of questions that haunt the ways that you're looking. It means these things that you're not necessarily aware of. And David and I both felt a real resonance just with that term, those paradoxical, you know, the mashup of meaning, and the ways in which we felt about our respective friends and their artistic practices. So I had seen a lot of Ellen's work, you know, in terms of these sort of sound installations, a really sophisticated take on ephemera and space and sound, and I thought, well, wouldn't this be perfect? And I think David will speak to his own sort of interest in bringing William's work to the table. And I just really like to say thanks to William and Ellen for taking a chance on, you know, what could have been a disaster. And I
and not in a really simple way, not in that sense of, just sort of all cohabiting and being happy with not doing a good job, but actually a really complex, a really deep and embodied sense, in the sense that we hope the exhibition you can feel certain pulls, especially when it's fairly quiet in the space. So for me, what I was interested in when I thought of William, I found somebody who has a real musical sense, right? And there's a tendency in music to think about shaping time. A lot of musicians will say things like, well, that's what music is a way to sort of give shape to time or give structure to time. And it's very different than an ephemeral environmental landscape. I'm not going to put too much on it, it's very it's some of those difficulties. But so one of the tensions we wanted to bring out was, on one hand, a sense of time that's constructed in a shaped way, and on the other hand, a sense of time that's maybe slightly more spatial, at least in its history, its influences. It can't always go back to reality. And so, William struck me as a really ideal person for that, because he's got a really strong background as a musician, but he's also, I think, sensitive to a number of different environments where music and sound take place and where they interact. And so the goal for the exhibition each step of the way was, again, to really emphasize the difficulties and not to place a value on them, not place a value on them positively or negatively. And there's lots of language for doing soft language for saying that's wrong, we can't communicate and that's a real problem. There's lots of language also for saying, hey, we can't communicate, that's fantastic, aren't we all just wonderful? And instead, really trying to, each step of the way, pull back every step in one direction towards the other and see how they can commingle.